The emergency lights on Meridian Prime had not flashed red in over 40 years. When they did, every species on the station felt the same cold dread in their bones, or whatever passed for bones in their bodies. Ambassador Kethral watched the holographic display with all 6 of his eyes. His mandibles clicked nervously as the distress signal played again. The voice belonged to a Vorian mining supervisor, young and terrified, speaking so fast that the translation software struggled to keep up. "They came from below," the voice said. "The drills broke through into something old, something that was sleeping. They are everywhere now. Please, anyone, we need help." The transmission ended with screams and the sound of metal tearing. Admiral Soreth, commander of the Telmari fleet, stood at the head of the council table. His scales were a deep blue, almost black, and his yellow eyes moved slowly across the faces of the gathered diplomats. He was over 300 years old and had seen many disasters. This one, he knew, would be worse than most. "The colony on Vexr 7 has awakened a Skrell hive," he said. His voice was calm, almost bored. "Our estimates suggest there are between 8 and 12,000 active drones. The colonists number just under 4,000. They have barricaded themselves in the central hub, but the barriers will not hold." "How long?" asked a Manari delegate, her liquid form rippling with anxiety. 40 hours at most," Soreth replied. "Likely less." Kethral pulled up the military projections on his personal screen. The numbers were not good. The nearest Telmari battle group was 11 days away. The Vorian defense fleet could arrive in 9 days, but they lacked the firepower to fight a Skrell swarm. Every calculation led to the same conclusion. "We cannot save them," Kethral said quietly. "The mathematics are clear. By the time any sufficient force arrives, the colony will be lost." The council chamber fell silent. 4,000 lives, and nothing could be done. It was the kind of cold truth that the galaxy had learned to accept. Resources were limited. Time was limited. Sometimes people died because the numbers did not work out. Admiral Soreth nodded slowly. "I recommend quarantine protocols. We will establish a blockade around Vexr 7, and when the colony falls, we will conduct orbital bombardment to eliminate the hive before it can spread." "You want to bomb the colony?" The voice came from the human section of the chamber. A woman stood up, her uniform simple and gray, her dark hair pulled back tight. She was not tall, not particularly impressive to look at, but her eyes were sharp, and she did not look away from the admiral. "Commander Marsh," Soreth said, his tone flat, "the colony will already be dead. We would only be destroying the Skrell." "The colony is not dead yet," Lena Marsh replied. 40 hours is a long time." Kethral made a sound that might have been laughter if his species could laugh. "Commander, with respect, there is no force in this sector that can reach Vexr 7 in time. Your own fleet is weeks away. What do you propose? That we ask the Skrell to wait?" Lena Marsh smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the kind of smile that made Kethral feel, for a reason he could not explain, slightly uncomfortable. "My ship is docked at Bay 7, she said. "The Steadfast can reach Vexr 7 in 6 hours. "Your ship," Admiral Soreth said slowly, "carries a crew of 18. 19, actually. We picked up a medic on our last stop. 19 humans against thousands of Skrell." Soreth's eyes narrowed. "Commander, I have studied human military history. Your species is capable of impressive things, but this is not impressive. This is suicide." Lena Marsh looked around the council chamber. Every face stared back at her with the same expression. Confusion, pity, the certainty that she had lost her mind. "We'll handle it," she said simply. The silence that followed was absolute. Kethral felt his mandibles freeze in place. He ran the calculations in his head again, then a third time. 19 humans, thousands of Skrell, A 40-hour window. The probability of success was so low that his mental processors refused to generate a number. "Commander Marsh," he said carefully, "I must ask, do humans not understand mathematics?" "We understand them fine," Marsh replied. "We just don't let them make our decisions for us." She turned and walked toward the exit. At the door, she paused and looked back. "If anyone wants to send supplies, we could use extra ammunition, and maybe some food. My engineer gets cranky when he's hungry." Then she was gone. The council erupted into noise. A dozen species talked over each other, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Admiral Soreth stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable. Kethril watched the door where the human had disappeared, and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He did not know what to call it. It was not hope, exactly. Hope required probability. This was something else. Something that did not fit into any category his mind could produce. He turned to his aide, a young Vorian named Tovek, who had been assigned to him just last month. "Document this," Kethril said quietly. "Every detail, every word." "For the official record?" Tovek asked. "No," Kethril's mandibles clicked slowly. "For the cautionary archives. When those humans die, future generations should learn from their mistake. Bravery without logic is just another form of death." But even as he said it, Kethril found himself watching the tracking data as the Steadfast undocked from Meridian Prime. The small ship turned toward the distant star where Vexr 7 orbited, and then it jumped to faster-than-light speed and vanished from his sensors. 19 humans, 40 hours, thousands of Skrell. Kethril had seen many illogical things in his long career, but this was something new. This was not just illogical, this was insane. And yet somewhere deep in his analytical mind, a tiny voice whispered something he would never admit out loud. What if they actually do it? He pushed the thought away. It was absurd. It was impossible. The math did not support it. But the humans had never seemed to care much about math. And that, Kethril realized, was what made them so terrifying. On the Steadfast, Commander Lena Marsh stood in the small cargo bay and watched her crew prepare. They moved with quiet efficiency, checking weapons, loading supplies, running final diagnostics on equipment that looked strange even to her. Danny Vega, her combat engineer, looked up from a pile of machinery and grinned. "So, Commander, what's the plan?" Lena Marsh thought about the 4,000 people waiting on Vexr 7. She thought about the Skrell, ancient and hungry, rising from the darkness below. She thought about the Council, and their calculations, and their cold acceptance of death. "The plan," she said, "is that we don't let those people die." "That's not really a plan," Vega pointed out. "No," Marsh agreed. "It's a promise. We'll figure out the rest when we get there." Around him, the crew of the Steadfast prepared for war. 6 hours to Vexr 7, 40 hours until the barriers fell. 19 humans against the darkness. The math said they would fail, but the humans had never been very good at listening. The Steadfast dropped out of faster-than-light speed above Vexr 7, and Commander Lena Marsh immediately knew that the situation was worse than the reports had suggested. The planet below was brown and rocky, covered in mining installations and processing plants. But even from orbit, she could see the smoke rising from the main colony. Emergency lights blinked across the surface like dying stars, and on her ship's sensors, she could see movement in the tunnels below. Lots of movement. "Getting readings on the Skrell," said Dr. Nina Castellan, the team's xenobiologist. She was a thin woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, and she had spent 30 years studying alien species. She had never studied the Skrell in person. No one had. The species had been thought extinct for centuries. They're spreading through the lower levels fast. The colonists have maybe 30 hours now, not 40. That we better hurry, Marsh replied. Find us a landing zone. The Steadfast descended through the thin atmosphere and touched down on a collapsed section of the surface facility. The landing was rough, but the ship held together. Danny Vega was already at the cargo doors before the engines finished cooling. All right, people, Sergeant Rick Holloway called out. He was a big man with a scarred face and hands that looked like they had been through too many fights. You know the drill. Unload fast, stay quiet, and try not to die in the first 10 minutes. The crew moved like a machine. They had done this before, not against Skrell, but against other things, in other places. Humans, Marsh had learned long ago, were very good at fighting in places where they were not supposed to survive. The equipment they unloaded looked strange. There were weapons, of course, rifles and explosives and cutting tools. But there were also sonic emitters, chemical mixing tanks, and what appeared to be a portable cooking station. Tovek, the young Vorian who had somehow convinced Ambassador Kethral to let him join the mission, stared at the cooking equipment with confusion. Is that a food preparation device? He asked. Sort of, said Cole Briggs, the team's demolitions expert. He was a short man with a wide smile and a collection of scars that suggested he had stood too close to too many explosions. It's for the cookout. The cookout? Tovek repeated slowly. Don't worry about it, Briggs said. You'll see. They moved into the colony through a broken maintenance tunnel. The air was thick with dust and the smell of something burnt. Emergency lighting flickered overhead, casting long shadows on the walls, and somewhere in the darkness they could hear clicking sounds. Thousands of legs moving on stone. The Skrell were hunting. Castellan pulled up her scanning device and studied the readings. The Skrell navigate using pheromone trails, she explained quietly. They leave chemical markers everywhere they go. That's how they coordinate. That's how the hive mind works. Can we disrupt it? Marsh asked. Maybe. Castellan looked at Briggs and his strange equipment. If we can create false pheromones, we might be able to confuse them, turn them against each other. That's the plan, Briggs confirmed. I just need time to cook up the right mixture. They reached the central hub an hour later. The colonists had barricaded themselves behind heavy mining doors, reinforced with whatever they could find. When the doors opened and the humans walked in, 4,000 terrified faces stared back at them. A Vorian female pushed through the crowd. Her carapace was cracked and stained with something dark, and she moved with the careful steps of someone who had not slept in days. You are the rescue team? She asked, looking at the 19 humans. This is all of you? This is all of us, Marsh confirmed. What's your name? Supervisor Kella. I have been managing the defense since the attack began. Kella's eyes moved across the human faces, searching for something. Hope, maybe, or sanity. The council said no one could reach us in time. The council was wrong, Marsh said simply. Now, show me your defenses. We have work to do. The next several hours were chaos. The humans split into 3 teams. Marsh led the first group in reinforcing the barricades. They welded metal plates to the doors, installed motion sensors, and set up kill zones where the Skrell would be forced to funnel through narrow passages. Holloway took the second team into the tunnels to map Skrell movement patterns. They moved through the darkness like ghosts, avoiding contact when they could, fighting when they could not. The Skrell were fast and deadly, with razor-sharp limbs and armored bodies that could shrug off small arms fire. But the humans were faster in the ways that mattered. They adapted. They improvised. They refused to stay dead. The third team, led by Briggs, set up the cookout. Tovek watched in amazement as the demolitions expert mixed industrial solvents with food-grade chemicals, imported spices, and something that came from a bottle labeled only with a hand-drawn skull and crossbones. What is that? Tovek asked. pointing at the bottle. My grandmother's hot sauce recipe, Briggs said cheerfully. She always said it could kill anything. Turns out she was more right than she knew. I do not understand human humor, Tovek admitted. Neither do we, kid. Neither do we. While Briggs worked, Danny Vega performed his own kind of magic. The colony's mining equipment had been abandoned when the Skrell attacked. Vega looked at a broken drilling rig and saw a weapon. He looked at a damaged transport vehicle and saw a mobile fortress. He looked at a pile of spare parts and saw a rotating defense turret. How do you do that? Tovek asked, watching Vega weld pieces together with frightening speed. Do what? See things that are not there. Make something from nothing. Vega shrugged. I don't know. I just look at stuff and think, what else could this be? Humans have always been good at that. We started as weak little apes on a planet full of things that wanted to eat us. We survived by being clever. Your species should have gone extinct, Tovek said. By all logical standards, you should not exist. Vega grinned. Yeah, we get that a lot. In the medical bay, Mira Santos worked without rest. She was the team's medic, a calm woman with steady hands and a dark sense of humor that somehow made the wounded feel better. She treated broken bones and deep cuts, burns and infections, humans and aliens alike. A young Vorian child sat on a table, crying softly as Santos bandaged his arm. His mother stood nearby, her own injuries untreated, watching the human work. You came here to die, the mother said quietly. You know that, don't you? Santos looked up and smiled. Maybe, but your son is going to live, and right now, that's all that matters. The mother had no response to that. She simply watched as the human finished her work and moved on to the next patient. Deep in the tunnels, Sergeant Holloway led his team through a section that had gone dark. Their lights cut through the blackness, revealing walls covered in strange patterns. They were getting close to a nest. Contact, whispered one of his soldiers, a young woman named Chen. 12 o'clock, 50 meters. Holloway saw them. 3 Skrell scouts, their eyeless heads turning slowly, sensing the air for prey. The creatures were the size of large dogs, but wrong somehow. Too many legs, too many joints, bodies that looked like they had been built from nightmares. On my mark, Holloway breathed. Take them quiet. The humans moved. 3 shots, 3 bodies. The Skrell dropped without a sound. Good work, Holloway said. Now let's get that emitter planted before their friends notice. Behind them, in the darkness, something much larger than a scout began to stir. The clock was ticking. 30 hours had become 25. The Skrell were still coming, still hunting, still hungry, but the humans were ready. They had their weapons and their cookout, and their stubborn refusal to accept the math. And somewhere in the colony, Cole Briggs finished his mixture and smiled. All right, he said to no one in particular. Let's see how these bugs like spicy food. 20 hours remained when the first real test came. The Skrell hit the eastern barricade with no warning. One moment, the motion sensors showed empty tunnels. The next, hundreds of drones poured out of holes in the walls that had not existed 5 minutes before. Commander Marsh was at the barricade when they came. She watched the swarm approach on the security monitors, a wave of clicking, chittering bodies that seemed to have no end. Hold the line, she ordered through the radio. Vega, I need that turret online now. Working on it, Danny Vega's voice crackled back. Give me 30 seconds. You have 10. The first Skrell hit the barricade. The colonist defenders opened fire, but their mining tools and improvised weapons did little against the armored drones. For every Skrell that fell, 3 more took its place. Marsh stepped forward with her rifle and started shooting. Each shot found its mark, hitting the soft spots between armor plates that Dr. Castellan had identified. The Skrell dropped. More came. Vega, Done! The turret roared to life. Danny Vega had built it from a mining drill and a transport engine. A spinning monster of metal and fire that tore through the Skrell ranks like paper. The swarm faltered, confused by this new threat. For a moment, they stopped advancing. Then, they started climbing the walls. "They're going around," Marsh said. "All teams, watch your ceilings." The fight lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, the barricade held, but barely. 3 colonists were dead. 6 humans were wounded, including Sergeant Holloway, who had taken a Skrell limb through his shoulder. Mira Santos found him sitting against a wall, pressing a rag against the wound and cursing quietly. "Let me see that," she said. "It's fine. Rick, your bone is showing." Holloway looked down at his shoulder and shrugged with his good arm. "I've had worse." "Name one time." "That bar fight on Nexus Station. You got hit with a chair. This is a hole in your body." "Details." But he let her treat the wound, wincing only slightly as she worked. "How are we doing?" Santos glanced around the medical bay. It was getting crowded. "We're holding, barely. But we can't keep taking hits like this." "Then we need to speed up the plan." In the central hub, Cole Briggs had finished his preparations. The chemical mixture sat in large containers, connected to the sonic emitters that would spread it through the ventilation system. The smell was incredible, a burning chemical odor that made eyes water and throats close up. "If I had to describe this smell," Tovek said, covering his breathing holes, "I would say it is like pain became a gas." "That's the capsaicin," Briggs explained happily. "Concentrated hot pepper extract. Humans love it. We put it on everything. But mixed with these industrial solvents and a few other secret ingredients, it becomes something special." "Special how?" "The Skrell communicate through pheromones, right? This mixture mimics their distress signals but corrupts them. When they smell this, their hive mind gets confused. They can't tell friend from enemy. They start attacking each other." Tovek stared at the containers. "You weaponized food seasoning." "Technically, my grandmother weaponized it. I just scaled it up." Dr. Castellan entered the hub, her face tight with worry. "We have a problem," she announced. "The main emitter in Tunnel 7 has stopped working. Without it, the mixture won't reach the lower hive. We'll only confuse the drones on the upper levels." "Can we fix it?" Marsh asked. "Someone would have to go down there, deep into Skrell territory, past dozens of nests." Castellan shook her head. "It would be suicide." Danny Vega looked up from his workbench. He had been building something new, something that looked like a backpack with too many wires. "I'll go." "Absolutely not," Marsh said immediately. "Commander, I built that emitter. I know exactly what's wrong with it. Anyone else would take twice as long to fix it, and we don't have that kind of time. You would be alone down there, Vega. No backup, no support. If you get into trouble, no one can help you." Vega smiled. It was not a scared smile. It was the smile of a man who had already made his decision and was just waiting for everyone else to catch up. "Then I better not get into trouble," he said. He was gone before Marsh could stop him. He slipped into the tunnels with nothing but his tools, a small rifle, and that strange backpack device he had been building. Holloway, his shoulder wrapped in bandages, grabbed his own weapon and started walking. "Where do you think you're going?" Santos demanded. "That idiot is going to get himself killed," Holloway said. "Nobody told him he could die without me." He disappeared into the tunnels after Vega. Far above the colony, in the comfort of Meridian Prime, High Observer Yenel watched the situation through relay drones. She was Telmari, like Admiral Soreth, but younger and more curious. Her job was to analyze military operations and identify successful strategies that could be replicated. So far, she had identified nothing that made sense. "The humans have divided their forces," she noted into her recording device. "They are attempting to disperse a chemical weapon through the ventilation system, while simultaneously defending multiple barricade positions. Their resources are insufficient for either task. Their casualties are mounting, and yet they continue. She pulled up the probability projections. The numbers had not improved. If anything, they had gotten worse. The Skrell were adapting to human tactics. The barricades were weakening. The chemical weapon might work, but only if the emitter could be repaired, and the soldier sent to repair it was almost certainly going to die. I do not understand human decision-making, Yenil admitted to her recorder. They see impossible odds and respond with action instead of acceptance. They lose soldiers and continue fighting instead of retreating. They make plans that depend on luck and stubbornness instead of calculation and resources. She paused the recording and watched the feeds from the colony. In one tunnel, she could see Danny Vega moving through the darkness, avoiding Skrell patrols by inches. In another, she could see Holloway following his trail, rifle raised, ready to kill anything that threatened his friend. In the central hub, she could see Commander Marsh organizing the colonists into defensive positions. The human woman had not slept in over 20 hours. She had been wounded twice and treated once, and still she moved, still she fought, still she refused to give up. Perhaps, Yenil said slowly, the humans understand something we do not. Perhaps the numbers are not the only thing that matters. She turned off the recorder. It was an unprofessional thought. Numbers were everything. That was what the Telmari believed. That was what every rational species believed. But watching the humans fight, Yenal began to wonder if belief itself might be a weapon, if refusing to accept defeat might somehow change the odds. It was a foolish idea, unscientific, illogical, and yet the humans were still alive. Against all calculation, against all reason, they were still fighting. Deep in the tunnels, Danny Vega reached the broken emitter. He opened his toolkit and started working, his hands moving with the speed of long practice. Around him, in the darkness, he could hear the Skrell moving, getting closer. "Come on," he whispered to the machine. "Come on, you beautiful piece of junk. Work for me." Behind him something clicked, then clicked again. Then the tunnel filled with the sound of thousands of legs moving in the dark. Vega didn't look up. He just kept working. And humans, when they had a job to do, did not stop. Not for odds. Not for fear. Not for anything. Danny Vega heard them before he saw them. The clicking of legs on stone. The wet sound of bodies pressing together in the dark. The Skrell were coming, and they were coming fast. He kept his eyes on the emitter. His hands did not shake. There was no time for shaking. 3 more wires, he whispered to himself. Just 3 more wires and this thing works. The first Skrell came around the corner 20 meters away. It was a scout, smaller than the drones, with long sensing limbs that tasted the air. It turned its eyeless head toward Vega and made a sound like breaking glass. More Skrell appeared behind it. 5, 10, 20. They filled the tunnel like water filling a pipe, their bodies climbing over each other in their eagerness to reach the prey. Vega connected the second wire. His breathing was slow. 2 more, he said. The Skrell charged. And then Sergeant Rick Holloway stepped out of a side tunnel and opened fire. The big man moved like a machine, his rifle barking in short, controlled bursts. Each shot found its mark. Skrell dropped, their armor cracking, their limbs twitching. But more came. Always more. "Vega!" Holloway shouted. "Would you hurry up?" "Working on it." Holloway's rifle clicked empty. He dropped it and pulled out a cutting torch, the kind miners use to slice through rock. It was not a weapon. It had never been designed as a weapon. But in Holloway's hands, it became one. He swung the torch in wide arcs, the superheated blades slicing through Skrell limbs and bodies. The creatures screamed, a high-pitched sound that hurt human ears. But they did not stop coming. Vega connected the third wire. Just 1 more. A Skrell got past Holloway and lunged at Vega. He ducked, feeling the razor limb pass inches from his head, and kicked out with his boot. The creature stumbled. Vega grabbed a wrench from his toolkit and swung it like a club, cracking the Skrell's armored head. He turned back to the emitter and connected the final wire. The machine hummed to life, lights blinked on, and from somewhere deep in the tunnels, Cole Briggs's chemical mixture began to spread. "It's working," Vega shouted. "Holloway, we need to move." They ran. Behind them the Skrell followed. But something was changing. The creatures were slowing down, their movements becoming jerky and uncertain. Some of them stopped completely, their sensing limbs waving in confusion. Others turned on each other, attacking with sudden violence. "The pheromones," Vega gasped as they ran. "It's confusing them. They can't tell who's who anymore." "Less talking," Holloway growled. "More running." They burst out of a maintenance shaft into a section of tunnels that the humans controlled. A squad of defenders was waiting, weapons raised. "Don't shoot," Vega yelled. "It's us." The soldiers lowered their weapons. One of them, a young woman named Peters, stared at the two men in disbelief. "You're alive," she said. "The commander said you were probably dead." "Not yet," Holloway replied. "Where is the commander?" "Central Hub. She's organizing a push." They found Lena Marsh standing over a holographic map of the colony, her face lit by the blue glow of the display. Around her, the remaining human soldiers and armed colonists waited for orders. "The emitter worked," she said without looking up. "The upper tunnels are in chaos. The Skrell are fighting each other instead of us." "So we won?" Tovek asked hopefully. "Not yet." Marsh pointed at the map. "The chemical only affects the drones. The Queen is immune. And she's not in the main hive. She's here." Her finger touched a point near the colony's geothermal core. "If she calls a full swarm before the confusion spreads further, she can override the chemical effects. The drones will reorganize and attack with everything they have." "Then we take out the Queen," Vega said. "With what? We're down to 15 combat-ready personnel. The Queen is surrounded by elite drones that respond directly to her pheromones. The chemical won't affect them." "So we make more chemical," Briggs suggested. "Blast her with everything we've got." "There's not enough time to make more, and even if there was, we need a way to get close enough to use it." Silence fell over the command center. High Observer Yenel, watching through her relay drones, recorded the moment. The humans had fought brilliantly. They had done everything right, but the math had caught up with them. They simply did not have the resources to finish the job. Then Commander Marsh looked up from the map and smiled. It was a tired smile, but there was something in it that made Yenel's scales tighten with an emotion she could not name. "Briggs, how much of your mixture do we have left?" "Enough for maybe one concentrated burst. If we can get it close to the Queen, it might confuse her elite guard long enough for us to get in." "And the mining charge from the geothermal station?" "Still in storage. Why?" Marsh's smile widened. "Because I have an idea." The plan was insane. Everyone agreed on that. It relied on perfect timing, incredible luck, and at least 3 things that should not have been possible. The humans loved it. 5 of us go in," Marsh explained. "Fast and light. We carry the chemical mixture and the mining charge. We get close to the Queen, deploy the chemical, and in the confusion, we plant the charge near the geothermal vent." "And then?" Holloway asked. "Then we run very fast and hope the explosion doesn't catch us." "What about the Queen?" "The geothermal vent connects to the main magma chamber. If we crack it open, everything within 100 meters gets cooked, including the Queen." Dr. Castellan studied the map. "The tunnel structure won't support that kind of explosion. The whole lower section will collapse." "Good. That seals the remaining Skrell underground. The colonists can evacuate to the surface while the bugs dig their way out. By the time they reach the surface, Council reinforcements will be here." "This is a suicide mission," Tovek said quietly. "Maybe," Marsh shrugged. "But probably not. We're very good at not dying." In the end, 6 volunteers stepped forward. Marsh herself, Briggs with his chemical mixture, Vega with his engineering skills, Holloway because he refused to let anyone else watch Vega's back. Santos, because someone needed to keep them alive. And Castellan, because she was the only one who could identify the Queen's weak points. "The rest of you hold the barricades," Marsh ordered. "No matter what happens down there, keep the colonists safe until help arrives." She looked at the tired, wounded, determined faces around her, humans and aliens alike. People who had come together in the worst moment of their lives and found something worth fighting for. "It's been an honor," she said simply. Then she picked up her weapon and walked into the tunnels. Her team followed without hesitation. High Observer Yenil watched them go. Her recording device captured every moment, every step, every breath. She did not understand what she was seeing. These humans were walking toward almost certain death, and they did not seem afraid. "Note for the record," she said quietly, "human psychological profile requires significant revision. Previous assessments of their risk tolerance appear to be dramatically understated." In the tunnels, the team moved fast. The chemical confusion was spreading, and most of the Skrell they encountered were too busy fighting each other to notice the small group of humans slipping past. But as they got closer to the Queen's chamber, things changed. The elite drones were different, larger, smarter, and completely loyal to their Queen. "Contact ahead," Holloway whispered. "4 elites, big ones." "Can we go around?" Marsh asked. "Negative. They're guarding the only entrance." Marsh looked at her team. 6 humans against 4 elite Skrell, with thousands more just a wrong sound away. "On my signal," she said, "we hit them hard and fast. No hesitation, no mercy. We get through that door, or we die trying." The team readied their weapons. Hearts pounded. Hands tightened on triggers. "Signal," Marsh said. The fight with the elite Skrell lasted less than 2 minutes. It felt like hours. The creatures were fast, faster than the regular drones, and their armor was thick enough to shrug off most rifle fire. But the humans had something the Skrell did not understand. They had each other. Holloway drew the first elite's attention, his cutting torch blazing in the darkness. When the creature lunged at him, Vega hit it from the side with a makeshift explosive that blew off 2 of its legs. Santos finished it with a shot through the exposed joint in its neck. Briggs sprayed his chemical mixture at the second elite. The creature screamed and thrashed, confused by the false pheromones. Marsh stepped in and put 3 rounds through its head before it could recover. The third elite got close, too close. Its razor limb caught Castellan across the arm, opening a deep gash that sprayed blood across the tunnel floor. But even as she fell, she shouted coordinates. "The joint, 3rd segment from the head." Holloway's torch found the spot. The elite dropped. The 4th elite ran. It turned and fled deeper into the tunnels, clicking frantically, calling for reinforcements. "Move," Marsh ordered, "before more come." They ran through the door into the Queen's chamber. And then they stopped. The Queen was massive. She filled the entire cavern, a mountain of chitin and flesh that pulsed with alien life. Her body was covered in smaller Skrell, attendants and guards that crawled across her surface like insects on a corpse. At her center, a cluster of eyes looked down at the humans with cold intelligence. She knew they were there. She knew why they had come. And she was not afraid. "Contact with the Queen," Marsh reported into her radio, though she doubted anyone could hear her this deep. "Beginning final phase." "She's calling them," Castellan gasped, clutching her wounded arm. "I can see her pheromone glands activating. She's summoning every drone in the hive." "Then we don't have much time. Briggs, hit her with everything." Cole Briggs stepped forward and activated his delivery system. A cloud of concentrated chemical mixture sprayed toward the Queen, coating her front section in burning, corrupting compounds. The Queen screamed. It was a sound that no human ear should ever have to hear, a sound that vibrated through bone and made teeth ache. Her attendants went mad, turning on each other, on her, on anything they could reach. "Now," Marsh shouted, "find the weak point." Castellan, despite her injury, studied the queen through her scanner. "There," she pointed. "Lower thorax, where the carapace plates overlap. The armor is thinner there." Santos pulled the last surgical blade from her medical kit. It was not a throwing weapon. It had never been designed for throwing. But she had practiced this move 1,000 times, in quiet moments when no one was watching. She threw. The blade spun through the air and struck the queen exactly where Castellan had indicated. It cracked the armor, opening a gap just wide enough for what came next. Vega was already moving. He sprinted toward the queen, dodging confused drones, ducking under slashing limbs. In his hands, he carried the mining charge, the same kind of charge used to crack open rock faces and expose mineral deposits. He reached the queen's body and shoved the charge into the crack Santos had created. Then he ran. "Everyone out!" Marsh screamed. "Move, move, move!" They ran. The queen's screams followed them, mixed now with something that might have been fear. She could not move, could not chase them. She could only watch as the small creatures that had invaded her domain fled toward the exit. Marsh was the last one out. She turned at the entrance to the chamber and looked back at the queen. For a moment, their eyes met. Human and Skrell, predator and prey. "Nothing personal," Marsh said, as she triggered the charge. The explosion was bigger than anyone expected. The geothermal vent cracked open, and superheated gas and magma erupted into the queen's chamber. The fire consumed everything: the queen, her guards, the eggs she had been laying in preparation for her new empire. And then the tunnels began to collapse. The team ran faster than they had ever run before. The ceiling fell behind them, the floor cracked beneath their feet, and the roar of destruction followed them like a living thing. Holloway grabbed Santos when she stumbled, throwing her over his shoulder without breaking stride. Vega pulled Castellan along, her blood leaving a trail on the stone floor. Briggs ran at the front, somehow finding the right path through the chaos. And Marsh ran at the rear, because a captain always left last. They burst out of the tunnel entrance just as the entire section collapsed behind them. Rock and metal crashed down, sealing the lower hive forever. Dust filled the air, and for a long moment, no one could see anything. Then the dust settled, and the silence came. 6 humans lay on the ground, gasping, bleeding, alive. Around them, the colony was quiet. No more clicking, no more screaming. The Skrell were buried under 1,000,000 tons of rock, and the queen was dead. "Did we do it?" Santos asked, her voice raw. Marsh pushed herself up on one elbow and looked around. In the distance, she could see the survivors emerging from the barricades. She could hear cheering. "We did it." 11 hours later, the Galactic Council relief fleet arrived. Ships filled the sky above Vexr 7, carrying soldiers and medics and supplies. They had come prepared for a massacre. Instead, they found a celebration. Ambassador Kethral was on the first shuttle down. He walked through the colony in a daze, his mandibles clicking in disbelief. The barricades were still standing. The colonists were alive. And the humans, those impossibly stubborn humans, were sitting in the central hub, eating rations and laughing. He found Commander Marsh near the medical station. She was getting her shoulder bandaged by Santos, who was also injured and should probably have been resting herself. "Commander," Kethral said, "I owe you an apology." Marsh looked up. "For what?" "I said that your mission was irrational, that you were walking to your deaths, that your species did not understand mathematics." "You weren't wrong about the math, but I was wrong about what math could predict." Kethral's eyes moved across the wounded, celebrating humans. "Our calculations said you had a 4% survival probability. How did you do this?" Marsh shrugged, wincing as the movement pulled at her wounds. We don't really do math in the field. We just do whatever needs doing. That is not an answer. No, but it's the only one I've got. High Observer Yennels submitted her report to the Telmari Admiralty the same day. It was the longest report she had ever written, and the most difficult. How could she explain what she had witnessed? How could she translate human irrationality into Telmari logic? In the end, she wrote only one recommendation. Do not engage humanity as adversaries. Their capacity for irrational success cannot be modeled or countered. They do not fight because they believe they will win. They fight because they refuse to accept any alternative. This makes them dangerous. And this, above all else, makes them valuable as allies. Recommend partnership at all costs. The Admiralty read her report. They did not understand it, but they approved her recommendation anyway. On the Steadfast, heading back to Meridian Prime, the crew gathered in the cargo bay for an informal celebration. Someone had found a bottle of something strong, and it was being passed around freely. Danny Vega sat next to Cole Briggs, nursing his drink. Hey Cole, what was actually in that pheromone mixture? Briggs grinned. Trade secret. Come on, we almost died down there. I think I deserve to know. Briggs considered this. Then he leaned in close. All right, but you can't tell anyone. I promise. Industrial solvent, 3 different kinds of pepper extract, a synthetic compound that mimics Skrell distress signals. He paused. And my grandmother's hot sauce recipe. She always said it could clear out any pest. Vega stared at him. You killed an alien queen with hot sauce. Technically, the geothermal explosion killed her. The hot sauce just confused her first. Vega started laughing. He laughed until tears ran down his face, until his wounded ribs ached, until Holloway threw a boot at him and told him to shut up. Commander Marsh sat apart from the celebration, looking out the viewport at the stars. They were beautiful, she thought, cold and distant and beautiful. Humanity had reached out to touch them, and the stars had tried to kill them. But humans were stubborn. Humans did not quit. 4,000 people were alive because 19 humans had refused to accept the math. Somewhere in the galaxy, someone was writing another report about the strange species from Earth. Another species was updating their files, adding new warnings and new questions. And on a tiny ship called the Steadfast, 19 humans flew home through the darkness. They had handled it, just like they always did.